Hello again, my name is Kevin Kelly. I'm one of the partnership staff that's helping out with the CCAP program this year. Welcome to the webinar, which is actually on the CCAP Candidate and Data Forum today. Our speaker will be Jim Lopresti. I should point out that there will be follow-up webinars on the 9th of January on the Executive Skills Portfolio and on April 10 on the certification exam. Both of them will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll now turn things over to Jim.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, and welcome everyone. Our apologies for the technical glitch at the beginning of this webinar. My name is Jim Lopresti. I'm speaking to you from my agency in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I administer the CCAP program. My responsibility is to assist candidates in the mechanics of being a candidate, that is, all the processes that are involved in submissions and scores and recording of scores and announcements. If this is the second in our 4 webinars on this series concerning CCAP, the first webinar was on general orientation to CCAP. If you missed that orientation webinar, it can still be accessed through the partnership on the CCAP page in an archive. Let's talk about some preliminary items concerning certification and the candidate data form. First of all, certification is based on a point-based system. There's a maximum of 3 years from date of enrollment as a candidate to accumulate points. And each of those points are from objective measures of either a candidate's kinds of experience in community action. That's the candidate data form, which is the topic for today's webinar. The candidate's skill in doing the work of community action. That's the Executive Skills Portfolio. As Kevin mentioned, that's the webinar that will be presented on January 9th. And the third is knowledge about community action. That is the exam, and that webinar will be provided on April 10th. The candidate data form, or for short CDF, is based on an honor system. The candidate signs and dates the form. You are not asked to prove anything that you write. It is an honor system. Next point is very important. You must use only the current revision of the candidate data form from the partnership website. The form was revised this past summer by the Commission. That's mostly a change in format. There's not really a change in points. So for anyone who's going to be updating a candidate data form, your previous candidate data form that you submitted is still valid. There's no need to resubmit. The next closing date for the candidate data form is Wednesday, January 23rd. That is 1 week later than it usually closes. The reason for that closing date this year is to allow opportunities for persons attending the Management and Leadership Training Conference in New Orleans to attend sessions there that can assist them with their candidacy. The candidate data form receives a provisional score as it arrives. That's not a final score, and it's not final until an ESP is scored. I won't get into all the technical reasons. Let's just say that there are certain audit triggers that occur when an ESP is submitted. That's why the score is considered provisional. Correspondingly, a CDF score is never communicated separately from the cumulative score with the Executive Skills Portfolio. That being said, to the large measure, a candidate can well estimate what their own score would be on the candidate data form. The scoring points are notated in the form itself. No partial points are given in any category on the candidate data form. That includes years of employment. That's important to note. And while it is the staff and CCAP volunteers that score the candidate data form, if there's an ambiguous entry that's not clear how that should be evaluated, that decision is made by the chair of the commission. And to advance to the examination, A candidate needs to total score of 700 points, combining the score for the candidate data form and the executive skills portfolio. That is whatever is the most recent one on file. And because it's a 3-year process, those points can grow over the years. Additionally, the candidate data form must score a minimum of 300 points. The same, by the way, is true of the executive skills portfolio. Now, a candidate may submit additional entries to a previously submitted candidate form at any time. There's a separate addendum page that's provided at the partnership website for that purpose. That addendum page is also usable if the candidate data form itself does not have enough items or boxes for you to enter your CDF experience. So the addendum form can serve that purpose as well. Whenever you have completed your candidate data form and any addendum pages, they should be coalesced into one document, scanned into one document, and submitted to this email address, ccapcontact@aol.com. I'll remind you that address again later in this webinar. That comes directly to my desk. The whole candidate data form and the addendum is in a PDF fillable form located on the partnership website. Just download it, make your entries, add your addendum pages as necessary, scan, and submit to that email address by the closing date, which, as you pointed out, is January 23rd, Wednesday, January 23rd, 2019. There's another difference this year in the candidate data form from previous years. It is now no longer necessary to submit copies of manuals or publications that you've authored. That used to be required. It is no longer required. We'll look at those particular parts of the candidate data form that address these topics in a few moments. But please do not submit any publications or manuals with your candidate data form. There's a small chance that a candidate might be asked to submit a copy of it for audit purposes. That's rare, but you would be notified in advance if that's necessary. Okay, that's covering the basics of introduction to the candidate data form as a whole. You will also now find on the partnership website a candidate data form guidance document that includes much of what we're talking about in this webinar, but details these instructions as well. I'm going to proceed now to look at specific parts of the candidate data form, and we'll walk through them. I'll be watching the Q&A panel on the far right-hand side of your screen to see if there are any questions along the way, and I will pause along the way to respond to those questions. If there's any problems with those questions or you're having difficulty, please email them to Charity or to Kevin at the partnership, and I will ask them if they've received any questions that I have not seen. But let's now go on to look at each of the 4 sections of the candidate data form and talk through it. First is the section on employment. There are 3 parts to the section of employment. We're looking at the first section, and that's number of years as a management or executive staff member on a community action agency. You'll see on the middle column of this table the number of points that are allotted per year. It's 15 points per complete year. It must be 1 full year. There's no partial points given. But you'll notice there's a maximum total points allowed, and that's true of all categories on the candidate data form. So we'll be looking at the number of points per entry, and we'll be looking at the maximum total points allowed for each of these categories in the candidate data form. You'll see below listed 5 items that describe what is considered management or executive staff in a community action agency or association. The position includes authority beyond the mere responsibility to carry out others' orders. You are given the discretion to make decisions. The position supervises at least one other employee. The position includes the responsibility to make reports directly to the board or to the CEO. The position includes accountability, administering a budget, and the position is a member of the executive team. You'll have to check, at least be able to check 3 of those 5 items for each management or executive staff position you claim in your history in community action under 1.1 in employment. Let's move on to the next 2 parts of employment. The number of years as a full-time management or as executive staff member in an organization other than a community action agency. That can cover any kind of organization, whether in the nonprofit or the for-profit sector. You may have been the manager of a company or of a department in a retail organization, for example. And there's 8 points a year granted for that. There's no need to have any checklist corresponding to this, up to a maximum of 50 points under this category. It is important if this is full-time management in another organization. On some occasions, some persons have claimed full-time under 1.2, while at the same time full-time in their agency. If those years overlap, they're not counted. The third option is for employment is, let's say you had been doing a degree in social work and interned in a community action agency in your last year of your degree. Those internship months count at 1 point per month, up to a total of 18 months. That's the section on employment. I don't see any questions in the Q&A box. Can I ask Kevin or Charity, have I missed any?
Nope. There aren't any in the Q&A box.
Okay, I'll continue. Now to section 2, which is the most complicated. That's the section on education. There are 12 separate sections to the education category. First is on college or graduate degrees. You can see that each degree has an amount it's worth. An associate degree is 40 points, bachelor at 100, a master's or above is 150. Those can accumulate. So if you have 2 bachelor's degrees, well, you see it won't equal 200 points because the maximum for the whole category is 150. So if you have an associate degree and a bachelor's degree, it's 140. If you have a bachelor's and a master's, it stops at 150. Okay? Second, for college credits earned in management courses other than those applied to a degree you have completed. Perhaps you've gone back to school, or perhaps you never completed your degree, and perhaps you took a course in leadership skills or at a school. And that course was not applied to a degree, but you did get college credit for it. It's 3 points per credit. You got a 3-credit course, that's 9 total points, for example. But if you participated in a management course that was completed, but for which you did not receive college credit, maybe it was a continuing education course because you were certified in some particular skill. If that course lasted a minimum of 12 hours or more, and it was management focused, however you would determine that means that. It may well be, for example, you needed to take a course on using Microsoft Word, Microsoft's products. That might be an example for this, all right? But again, The course must be a minimum of 12 hours or more. The next category is a section on specialized community action, national, state, and regional executive training programs. Over the years, the Certification Commission has received requests from various organizations for special accreditation of training programs that either are comprehensive in their coverage of the community action body of knowledge, or perhaps have specialized in targeting leadership skills for special service to community action. When the Commission accredits a specific program, it is listed as acceptable on the section of the CDF. You'll see on the next page those programs that have been so accredited. This section of the candidate data form provides points only for those programs on this list that have been predetermined to meet certain criteria. If they don't appear on this list, you can't include your training experiences here. If you have not completed all that is required for one of those accredited programs, you cannot list it here either. However, if you participated in any of these programs and haven't completed, you can still enter the training sessions themselves separately. You might call it a la carte in subsections 5 or 7 that we're going to look at below. You see on the list that some of these programs on the list no longer exist. That's because there's no time limit at looking backwards to any of these programs. Executive Development Institute, that was presented by the Missouri Association back in the 1990s, was the first one, along with CCAP certification training program that was approved. The Executive Development Institute no longer exists, whereas the CCAP certification training program is ongoing. And you can see as you look down toward the bottom of the list that Roma training certification programs are included. Now, that means if you have completed the process of becoming a nationally certified Roma trainer or a nationally certified Roma implementer, that counts for points in this section on the candidate data form. You can't claim both, just one of them. That same is true with Partnership Pathways Reviewer Training, and I especially want to note the National Family Development credential, because that is very specific. That is specifically the program it's a national program that is recognizing those persons who've completed the whole family development credential that is based on the Empowerment Skills for Family Worker course authored by Dr. Claire Forrest and led by an FDC instructor. It only relates to that specific program. Again, you might have participated in programs similar to this. They can be entered a la carte, training by training, in the following subsections. I'm going to go on to the next section. I'm checking in the Q&A box to see if there are any questions specifically about this. I see one about, suppose you do not remember the institutional name. Enter what you do know anyway. I want to mention something about how evaluators who evaluate a candidate data form look at it. Their intent is to be inclusive, not exclusive. So please enter it. If there's some question about it, it's ambiguous, the chair of the commission can make a decision about that. Enter what information you can and claim it. I'm sorry, Charity, it sounded like I interrupted you when I began to answer that question. Let me turn over to you and ask you, were you going to address a different question?
Yes, there is one more from Carrie Altman. She wants to know, if you are currently working on a master's degree, will the credits you have taken at the time of the application be considered, even if you haven't
Yes.
finished your, yes, excellent.
Yeah. Any credits that you don't yet have a degree for will count. Yes. If you gain that master's and your candidate data form, you need to do an addendum. That's one of those addendum page. You make notation that that has happened so that points will be adjusted. They will be taken out of that part and you will be gained fully credit under the degree that you have. But that needs to be noted, and again, I mentioned the addendum form, which is sent in a following year, if you need to have an additional year to qualify, is when you would notate such changes. Okay?
Thanks, Jim.
Let's go on out to the next items under education. 2.5 is management seminars completed, focused specifically either on the fundamentals of community action or on not-for-profit management. These are seminars. You'll notice that there's 3 points for every 6 contact hours. That's presuming it's an all-day seminar. 6 contact hours are what is considered in a training day a full day. That is, you're taking an hour for lunch. So that's what's meant by that. So there's at least a full-day management seminar. And you can have up to 10 of those. You see a total maximum of 30 points. Now the next ones listed in that are for shorter training experiences. Number 2.6, if you attended community action related state, regional, or national association training events, for example, if you went last August to the Partnerships Annual Convention in Denver, or if you go next year in Chicago, or if you go to a state association training anytime this year, or your regional association, or if it's a Head Start Association training, you get 1 point per contact hour per event. So that's up to 30 points. This is probably the one that candidates most use and most quickly max out. Number 2.7 is different. That's management-related seminars or workshops that are sponsored by professional or trade associations, business organizations, government agencies, or commercial seminar producers. This is not then directly out of community action, but it is related to your management and leadership activities. Again, you'll notice it's 1 point per half a day. That would be 3 hours. We consider 6 hours a full day, up to the maximum total of 20. Before I go on now to the next items, which are not specifically about trainings you go to, but just having gone to a conference, I'm going to check to see what questions are in the question box. Someone asked, would David Bradley's War on Poverty seminar fit in 2.5? Yes, it would. Okay. Are there other questions that I missed on that, Charity?
Nope.
Okay. Let's look now at numbers 2.8, 2.9, and on the next slide, it'll go on through 10, 11, and 12. 2.8 is if you've attended your state association conference. Notice this is just attending the conference. What's the point of this? It's different from the trainings. Trainings are specific, targeted learning sessions on a topic. The point is this: if you are going to a state association conference, you're networking with people, your learning is going on over lunch conversation, going to hear general sessions, meeting with other persons from other organizations. So it's considered that every time you go to a conference, it's a learning experience. So you can go to 5, you can claim 5 of those for your state association, up to 10 points. You can claim 5 for your regional Community Action Association. These are, by the way, only community actions so far. We're going to get to allied associations on the next page. If you attend the Community Action Partnership Convention, that continues. It's 2 per year. By the way, that's not just the convention in August. That should also identify the MLTC Management Leadership Training Conference in January each year. So for those, each year, again, up to a total of 10. The next one, 2.11, is if you've attended the annual NCAF Legislative Conference. That's the only conference from NCAF this relates to, and it happens every March in Washington, D.C. So if you attend the Legislative Conference for NCAF in March in Washington, you can claim 2 points per year. Now, 2.12 is for all other kind of community action-related state, regional, or national conferences. For example, Head Start or weatherization, again for a total of 10 points. Okay? Now I see Kelly asked, would I list the Leadership Academy facilitated in Missouri in 2.5? Yes, it fulfills those requirements. Let's go back. The question was relating to 2.5. It's management seminars that last for a full day. Okay, and it would be, again, it would be 3 points for each day. So if a seminar lasts more than 1 day, if it's like a 2-day seminar or a 3-day seminar, each day at 6 hours counts per 3 points for every 6 contact hours. Okay? Did I miss any questions on this section, Terry?
No, sir. That was the last one.
Okay. Let's move on to the next session, Section 3. Community action leaders engage in a variety of activities that reach beyond their own agency responsibilities, the kinds of activities that advance the vision and values of community action. Community action leaders sometimes function as presenters and panelists at conference, sometimes publish articles or send out newsletters, sometimes serve as members of advisory groups or planning committees, sometimes serve on boards. The CDF provides all these options for candidates to have a place to inventory those kinds of activities in the 9 subsections that we're going to look at now. The first 2 are the same. If you've done an instructional presentation to a community action agency other than your own, you get 1 point per hour, up to 5 hours per event, up to a total of 60 points. Let's say you went to give an instructional, by the way, if you're a Roma trainer, that's an example. You've gone on to do an instructional presentation to other community action agencies about, you have an evidence-based program that works with resiliency principles to uplift families, and you want to train other agencies on that evidence-based program. That's an example that would count in 3.1. But let's say you're part of a panel that's doing that presentation. You're not the leader of the panel, you're not the presenter, but you're a panelist who adds to that conversation. That you would list into 3.2. So there's 2 ways in which you could be, in 3.3, that's 2 ways in which you can get points for making a presentation to CAAs other than your own. Now, let's say you are presenting it to non-community action organizations. There are 2 ways to do that in 3.2 and 3.4. So let's say you gave that same instructional presentation on a resiliency-focused family development principle that's an evidence-based practice that's working in your agency, that you've done it to a local mental health nonprofit organization that's not part of the CAA network. That would be an example of 3.2. Or, if you're that panel during that presentation, you would enter that in 3.4. Okay? So that's meant to be cover the ways in which you might be presenting on community action to agencies, organizations professionally involved in the work of community action or in affiliated ways as community ways. Number 3.5 is a more generic category. Community action leaders are often called upon to contribute their expertise to things like planning groups or evaluation panels that might help communities meet new challenges or improve the quality of care and service. Or those leaders might work in interagency groups to generate new approaches to support or advocate on behalf of groups of people who are systematically excluded from active participation in the economic life of the community. That might mean you're being part of a statewide group to advise policymakers, or maybe you're part of a committee planning a multi-agency effort at community renewal, or maybe you're representing your agency on some kind of a commission that evaluates the work of other agencies. Here you can catalog any of those kinds of efforts where in some way you have partnered with others outside your agency to make a difference in your community or your state. It's very inclusive for all those kinds of ways that you're involved. Note there's something about it. It's kind of like outside your agency. It's showing your leadership. It's showing that you're a community action professional, not just focused on what you do internally, but focused on the mission of community action and engaged in that mission in the larger community. Okay? I'm going to now take a look at subsections 6, 7, 8, and 9, and then I'm going to go look at the Q&A panel. Let's go to 6, 7, 8, and 9. 3.6 is publication of articles on community action matters. There are different kinds of articles that you might write. It might be a letter to the editor. It might be a newsletter. It might be an article in the local paper. The evaluators have different points based on what kind of publication it is, and you indicate that on the candidate data form. You used to be required to submit a copy of it, but as I mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, that is no longer the case. Please do not submit a copy of anything that you've published. It is possible, though unlikely, that at a time of audit you may be asked to submit something. Only then would you need to send it in. 3.7 is membership on a community action agency board of director. Only on a community action agency board of director. Here's the reason that's there. In the days when the certification program was established by the partnership in the early 1990s, it was recognized that a lot of people who are in leadership positions in community actions, especially people who were in architects of community action, and especially in the 80s and 90s, a lot of them were people who learned the skills of community action from the ground up. And some of them may have been, for example, representatives of the low-income community on the tripartite board before they were employed. Well, the commission wanted to give recognition of that. It might not necessarily have been they have been a representative of the low-income community. They may have business representatives or elected representatives in another context in the tripartite board, but then so enamored of the work of community action that eventually joined the staff. The commission allowed for recognition of those years of membership on a community action board, even if it was 30 years ago or more. Okay? All right. 3.8 is membership on state, regional, or national community action agency boards. And that's very specific, on the board of your state, or regional, or national association. Now, subsection 3.9 is membership on other kinds of human service organizations, human services organizations, things that provide something like what community action does. For example, you might be on the board of directors of your local, for example, I was on the board of directors of a county organization that distributed pass-through funds from various federal programs. So that's, for example, as a member of that board. But it was related to human services, okay? So that's 3.9 on the section of involvement in national, regional, state, and local community action activities. I'm now going to look at the Q&A panel and see what questions are there. Someone said, representing agency on a CSBG task force for the state would go in 3.5. Yes, definitely would. Let me see, are there other questions? That's the only one I see in my...
It's the only one I see here, too.
I see something, for example, or is that part of the same question? Let me go on. Now, I am seeing other questions. I see a question, what constitutes an event in 3.5? Is an event counted as being on I'm sorry for the pause, folks. And you're not seeing questions on your, Charity, on your panel? Your question and answer panel?
I have one that talks about the board. For 3.7, would board membership, and it looks like you did cover that, board membership for community action subsidiary board count in this section?
Yes.
And the example you gave was, a community action agency held, right? And then, let's see.
If it is in some way a delegate agency, yes, the answer would be yes.
Mm-hmm. This one was focused on housing. Yep.
Okay. I also have a question about what constitutes an event in 3.5. Let's go back to look at 3.5. For example, if you are on a peer review team, and that review team, you're a permanent member, and you need to review different agency plans on this team, and you met on December 1st to review agency Y, and you did that, and you met for 2 hours, and then agency Z, you were asked to review that in January 4th. Each of those counts as an event. So it's not just you're being on a team, but each time your team does something. You see, each time you have now for example, if you're a pathway reviewer, and you review agency X and you review agency Y, each of those would count as an event. I think that answers the question, right?
And it has to do with how many years as well, Jim.
How many years?
So it says that
regardless of how many, yes. Regardless of how many years, that's correct. Now, because if you've been on a task force for many years, that means you've been very active in a leadership role, And that means each year you've been doing these number of activities, you're going to rack up that 50 points pretty quickly. Remember, that's your maximum. So when you get to that maximum of 50 points, further ones aren't going to count. Okay, but it doesn't matter how many years. I think that's the intent of the question. Do you read it the same way, Charity?
Yep, that's how I got it too, Jim.
Okay, cool. All right, let's, shall we move on to section 4? Which is another slide further. And that's involvement. There are 3 items in section 4. Involvement in publishing and training and in association management outside of community action. Section 4 is an attempt to catch some things that don't quite fit in other categories. Now, for example, 4.1 is instructional materials. Let's say you did a video to train your frontline staff on culturally competent care, how to pay attention to the unique needs of clients from different cultural backgrounds, where you're paying attention to county requirements concerning non-discrimination according to race and religion or sexual orientation or gender identity, or et cetera. And your video trains them. That's an instructional material. Or it may be that you've drawn up a checklist for the persons who are volunteers for your agency who respond to specific needs. For example, any one of those documents counts as instructional materials. Again, the intent is not to be exclusive. There's so many different ways you may carry out that responsibility. Just indicate what it is. No longer, again, is anyone asked to submit those materials. Instructional presentations on community action management for non-CAA-related organizations. This differs from subsection 3 in that you're talking about your management to associations that are outside your community action network. Let's say you've done an excellent job in human resource management, and your state human resource management association wants you to talk about that. You see, that's not about community action, but it's about you as a manager of human resources. You see, that's what that's meant to be for. 4.3 is involvement in non-community action related association management organization. This is, for example, for those of you who might be on your local church's school board or your local church's, whatever you might call it, oversight organization, et cetera. Whatever might be any other kinds of involvement in the community, not community action related, but show you engaged and involved in a larger community. Okay, that's what is meant to be covered in 4.3. This one fills very quickly for many candidates. Okay? I'm going to go on to the final slides. After we check the question and answer panel, I don't see any new ones. Do you, Charity?
Nope, I do not.
Okay. Next page you're looking at is a copy of what the CDF addendum page looks like. And this, again, is also on the partnership website. And because you can see, by the way, the light blue on next to your name, it's also a fillable PDF. What you do, if you have more entries than there's space on the candidate data form that's been provided to you, you can add those on this form. Put your name, the date, and check the box according to which one of those 27 subsections of the candidate data form just additional entry refers, and that's where we just circle it back to the CDF. So if you need to add any of those to your candidate data form, again, just scan it, add it to the candidate data form in the PDF that you submit by the closing date. This same addendum page can be used let's say you don't gain enough points in 2019 to qualify along with your executive skills portfolio to take the exam, and you maybe have to accumulate 50 more in 2020. You don't do a whole new CDF. You just do addendum page 1 for each of those heading sections, all right? And then scan them together and submit them in the following year by that next year's deadline. That's what the addendum page looks like. Okay. As I mentioned, there's a CDF guide on the partnership website. This will remind you of much of what we're talking about in this webinar. That guide is to understand the candidate data form. It's also used, hopefully on the website, for persons who are just, scanning and looking for information on CCAP. But that new guide is now published on the website. And there is help. If you haven't listened to the CCAP orientation, you can go back and take that from the archive. This will be archived and available soon. And as you know, the ESP and examination webinars are up and coming. But there's more help than that. Remember, candidacy lasts for 3 years. About a half of candidates completed in the first year. But many take more than the full 3 years to build points. And sometimes some persons take the exam more than once. It's rare. 85 to 90% of people who take the exam pass it, though many feel like they haven't, but they do. So there's there's 3 years to do this. And it is designed to provide those opportunities we've talked about before for persons who progress, who come up through the ranks, as well as who are new to community action. All the forms you need are on the website. And you can choose a CCAP pathway mentor to work with you. If you go to the partnership website, there you'll find a list of over 50 trained CCAPs who are mentors from across the country who can be an assist for you. And you'll note on the website there will be a study guide for the 2019 examination. After you submit your executive skills portfolio, hoping you're successful, then you will find that guide is available for you. So there is help. Does CCAP belong at the end of your name? We hope so. We have the chance to have that opportunity for you, perhaps next year in Chicago or following years. I think the year after that is in Seattle. I don't know when is after that. We hope to be able to have you walk across the stage and receive your certificate. After this webinar and at any time, please feel free to contact me at ccapcontact@aol.com with any of your questions. If your questions that you posed on the Q&A panel were not adequately addressed in this webinar, please follow up with an email message to that address. I check that address frequently every day, comes right to my desk. It is my responsibility to help you become a successful CCAP candidate. My job is to help you through the process. You have CCAP mentors to help you with the content questions about community action and me to help you with the process questions. Take advantage of that.
Jim, we have a question. And yes. The question is, do we receive credit for this presentation?
No one's ever asked that.
That's a good question.
Why not? Why not? It is exactly. It certainly should be. Right. Well, I have to look at. No one has ever asked that question. Let's go back up through exactly where I think we would put that, because I think you should be able to do that. Let's go back up to sections into. I suppose that would count as a 2.6, don't you think? I would suggest go ahead and put it there. This is one contact hour, and it is certainly a National Association training event. That's interesting. I'll remember this question. And I'll use it as an example.
I like
Pardon?
that, and I think it might help them to spread the word about CCAP in their own organizations. So if somebody else is asking them a question about CCAP, now they're more prepared to answer that question.
That's true. Okay. Well, that's what I've got to offer for today. I want to thank everyone for participating, and again, I look forward to continued conversation with you through that email address. Let me go back to that last slide so that you see it again. Remember that my goal, or my responsibility as the CCAP administrator, is to help you become a successful CCAP candidate. Thank you. Any final words from you, Cherry?
I'm grateful that everybody came and listened to our presentation. I wish everybody the best on their candidacy and then their test.
Thank you, everyone.